Part 1: The Rise of Humanism and the Renaissance Cognitive Shift. The transition of Western European thought in the 14th century did not appear as a sudden rupture, but as a profound restructuring of cognitive foundations existing since the Middle Ages, when feudal structures and scholastic dogma began revealing limits before realities, volatility, a new operating system of thought formed, placing man at the center of all reflection. This was the rise of humanism, an intellectual movement not merely recovering ancient values, but an effort to re-establish dignity and individual autonomy within the universe. Instead of viewing the world through the ocentrism dominating for 10 centuries, humanity began building an anthropocentric worldview. This shift created an important premise for modern man's concept: an entity possessing intellect, freedom, and endless creative potential to change their own destiny. The key figure in this transition was Francesco Petrarch, who laid the first stones for humanist thought. Petrarch did not seek answers for human issues in dry, logical definitions of Parisian theologians, but found them in the intellectual depth of ancient authors like Cicero and Virgil. He bravely announced the existence of a historical distance between his era and the glory of Greco-Roman civilization, promoting efforts to recover forgotten ancient manuscripts through tireless searching. In his work Secretum, Petrarch presented a dramatic inner dialogue between himself and Saint Augustine, reflecting the struggle between old ascetic ideals and the desire to affirm individual secular values. Petrarch's doubt was the clearest sign of a self-structure gradually detaching from religious collectivism toward individual uniqueness. The educational system acted as a vital operating engine for spreading humanism through the concept of Studia Humanitatis. This academic program focused on subjects cultivating human values, including grammar, rhetoric, history, poetry, and moral philosophy. The core goal of Studia Humanitatis was not training specialized clergy, but creating citizens capable of independent thinking, coherent expression, and active participation in social life in intellectual centers like Florence. Under the strong patronage of the Medici family, humanists had space to perform methodological revolutions. The establishment of the Platonic Academy in Florence brought Plato's thoughts back to a prominent position, creating a necessary counterweight to scholastic Aristotelianism while emphasizing the beauty of ideas and the ability to reach the absolute through human intellect. One of the most important texts redefining human dignity during this period was the Oration on the Dignity of Man by Giovanni Pico della Mirandola. Pico built a groundbreaking argument affirming that man is the only creature in the cosmic chain of being without a fixed nature according to Pico God, created man as a free entity, capable of determining their own place, and nature man can choose to degenerate to animal levels or ascend to angelic heights through intellectual and moral cultivation. The concept of man as a chameleon of the universe in Pico's thought completely broke the rigid hierarchy of the previous era. It established a strong belief in self-improvement and world reformation, making individual responsibility the new moral foundation for Renaissance society's development. From the perspective of cognitive science, the explosion of humanism was linked to a sudden change in accessing and processing information, the invention of the Gutenberg press, and widespread circulation of philosophical texts created a strong impact on the neuroplasticity of scholars, then no longer limited to a single church source. The human brain was forced to develop more complex comparison and critical processes. The development of rhetoric in humanist education strongly activated functional areas related to communication and sharp analysis. Reading ancient texts was not just gathering knowledge but a mental training process to view reality through the eyes of a subject with judgment. Wright's intellectual curiosity was now seen as an evolutionary drive instead of a sin needing suppression as in previous centuries. Besides that, geopolitical factors like the fall of the Byzantine Empire in 1453 led to a wave of Greek scholars migrating to Western Europe, carrying linguistic skills and precious manuscripts regarding scientific, astronomical and philosophical knowledge previously unknown. This cultural exchange created a strong intellectual resonance similar to how Eastern civilizations value self-enlightenment. Renaissance humanists believed every field of knowledge from art and math to politics must aim at one goal: perfecting human nature. This optimism formed multi-talented Renaissance men, exemplified by Leonardo da Vinci or Leon Battista Alberti, who broke boundaries between theory and practice, between art and science, to prove the infinite power of individual intellect. However, the rise of humanism also carried deep inner contradictions requiring profound analysis. As man was placed at the center, they simultaneously faced the burden of freedom and human finitude. The concept of virtue or personal ability became a new but fierce standard where human value was measured by practical achievements and the ability to master destiny instead of dogmatic submission. The fragmentation of the unified medieval worldview began creating concerns regarding the relationship between free will and divine providence. Debates about the nature of power, secular morality and individual status in society laid foundations for intellectual and religious revolutions in following centuries, making this period a vital Preparation for the birth of modern thought. How do you evaluate Pico della Mirandola's argument that man has no fixed nature and has the right to determine themselves? Is this absolute freedom a wonderful privilege helping us evolve, or a source of psychological instability in a world without rigid spiritual supports? The shift in objective from seeking absolute truth in the afterlife to exploring man's existing value in this world was the core of the Renaissance cognitive transition. It permanently changed how we define ourselves and humanity's potential in the flow of history. The values pursued by humanists are not just fragments of the past, but seeds for modern freedom and reason. Understanding the rise of humanism helps us realize that human intellect always has the ability to restructure itself to overcome circumstantial limits, creating great leaps in constructing civilization. Part 2. Niccolò Machiavelli and the formation of the reality power operating system. The appearance of Niccolò Machiavelli within the flow of Renaissance thought marks a significant rupture in how humans view politics and power. Before his era, Western political theories were shrouded in Christian ethics and abstract ideals of a perfect state from Aristotle or Plato. However, with a sharp empirical vision honed through fierce upheavals in Florence, Machiavelli took a bold step by detaching politics from traditional moral chains. He did not ask how a leader should behave according to holy moral standards, but focused on observing what actual leaders did to gain and maintain power in a world full of betrayal and uncertainty. This shift was not just a change in methodology, but the establishment of a new source code for modern political science, where practical effectiveness became the only measure for success or failure. To understand Machiavelli's thought, we must look at the chaotic context of Italy in the 16th century, when city-states were constantly torn by foreign invasions and internal power struggles. In his work, The Prince, he introduced the concept of verita effettual, the effectual truth of the matter. He argued that those obsessed with pursuing ideal models of non-existent kingdoms would soon face destruction instead of protecting the state. Machiavelli viewed human nature as ungrateful, fickle, deceptive, and greedy. Therefore, a wise ruler cannot rely on the fragile love of the people, but must rely on fear without causing hatred. The coldness in his arguments was actually an effort to protect community stability, because he believed a firm political order is the only foundation for humans to exist and develop. One of the most famous symbols in Machiavelli's thought is the combination of the lion's strength and the fox's cunning. He argued that a leader must know how to transform into a lion to scare wolves, and a fox to recognize traps. This requires absolute moral flexibility. The ruler must be ready to perform acts considered cruel or deceitful if it serves the supreme interest of the state known as reason of state. Machiavelli did not praise evil, but he affirmed that in politics, keeping promises can sometimes lead to the system's collapse. Therefore, the leader must know how not to enter the good path when circumstances compel. This separation creates a morally neutral space where personal values must give way to collective survival responsibility. Machiavelli observed contemporaries like Cesare Borgia to conclude that success does not lie in abstract mercy, but in the ability to manipulate variables of reality. He argued that the ruler's morality must be unique, completely different from individual Christian morality. If personal morality aims for salvation, political morality aims for state preservation and prosperity. From the perspective of modern neuroscience, Machiavelli's thought reflects a powerful cognitive control mechanism in the prefrontal cortex. Decision-making in politics requires the ability to inhibit momentary empathy to focus on long-term strategic goals when an individual holds power. Studies indicate that neural networks related to empathy, especially the mirror neuron system, tend to decrease activity, giving way to risk and reward evaluation systems. Machiavelli seemed to understand this instinct hundreds of years ago when he required the leader to have a mind always ready to change with the wind of fate, or fortuna the ability to maintain sobriety and cold reason before emotional pressures is the key for a prince to master their destiny and that of the state. This relates closely to the brain's executive function in filtering emotional noise to make decisions based on survival probability calculations. The similarity between Machiavelli's thought and Eastern legalism of Han Fei is a unique intellectual fiber. Both rejected using hypocritical morality to rule and emphasized law's tactics and authority. They both believed the world is not run by individual kindness but by the balance of interests and fear. However, Machiavelli did not just write for princes with cruelty in discourses on Livy. He expressed deep support for the republican model. He believed a free nation can only exist when citizens possess political virtue, or virtue not gentle religious virtue but strength, courage, wisdom, and devotion to the common good. For him, conflict between social classes like nobility and commoners was not a sign of decay but the drive creating good. Laws protecting freedom, if regulated by a strong institution. Freedom in Machiavelli's thought is not boundless but within the framework of law and duty. The concepts of virtue and fortuna. In Machiavellian philosophy, create a dramatic interaction between human effort and historical randomness. Fortuna was likened to a raging river that can wash away everything, but someone with virtue knows how to build dams and dikes to stop it when waters are calm. This proactive thought reflects the core era spirit. Man is no longer a pawn of fate, but the architect of their life through practical action. However, the price for this mastery is the leader's spiritual solitude, who must always wear a mask to fit the era's requirements. Machiavelli's effectual truth stripped the beautiful veneer of power institutions, forcing humans to face the naked and sometimes brutal nature of political existence. He affirmed a great prince knows how to use both man and beast within to maintain order. The separation between personal morality and public responsibility laid foundations for political responsibility in modern society, where the final outcome often justifies necessary means. Machiavelli also emphasized the importance of having a national militia instead of relying on mercenaries. He argued those holding guns for money would never have enough loyalty and courage to protect the country in lethal hours. Only citizens holding guns for their freedom and families possess true virtue to face disasters fortuna may bring. This was an important shift in military thought, linked closely to building patriotism and national consciousness. His thoughts caused waves of fierce opposition for centuries, leading to the term Machiavellianism, often used to denote cunning and unscrupulousness. However, looking deeper into his thought structure, we see a passionate patriotism and a burning desire for a united, strong Italy free from foreign dependence. Machiavelli did not create evil, he was simply the first to bravely record how evil operates in power corridors, so we can control and use it purposefully. His legacy is not advocating violence but enlightenment on political reality operations, helping humans escape naivety and prepare for challenges of a modern competitive world. The logic system Machiavelli left is a power source code that cannot be erased, a design for survival where pragmatic reason is always the supreme guide for all political action. Part 3. Impossible Dreams. Thomas More. Erasmus and the Yearning for a Humanistic Society. Parallel to the harsh political realities that Machiavelli exposed, another flow of Renaissance thought directed human minds toward peaks of idealism and social morality. This was the stage where Northern humanists, specifically Desiderius, Erasmus and Thomas More, sought to blend classical knowledge with humanistic spirit to reform society and religion from within. If Machiavelli taught humans how to survive in the darkness of power, then Erasmus and More outlined blueprints for the light of kindness and justice. They did not view humans as creatures merely obeying fear, but considered humanity as entities capable of reaching perfection through education and virtue cultivation. This intersection created a profound dialogue about the nature of a good life and the structure of an ideal nation where wisdom serves not individual schemes but the common happiness of the community. Desiderius Erasmus, known as the Prince of Humanists, performed a direct attack on the prejudices and corruption of the church and society of his time through the work The Praise of Folly. Using a sharp satirical voice, he let the character Folly praise her own role in every aspect of life, from trivial human joys to empty religious rituals. However, behind that satirical veneer was a serious humanistic philosophy. He called Philosophia Christi the philosophy of Christ. Erasmus believed the essence of faith did not lie in complex logical debates of scholasticism or elaborate rituals, but in inner transformation and altruistic actions. Following wise examples, he emphasized the importance of direct access to original texts and using reason to purify superstitions. Erasmus's thought represented a powerful belief in the strength of humanistic education. He affirmed that humans are not born human, but become human through learning and training processes. The impact of Erasmus on the cognitive structure of European society can be explained through cognitive dissonance. When traditional norms were challenged by new knowledge and intellectual satire, the human brain was forced to re-evaluate old beliefs to find a new balance. Erasmus created an intellectual environment allowing healthy doubt to exist, stimulating the development of critical thinking. His focus on rhetoric and linguistics helped refine human expression and empathy at that time. From a neurological perspective, this change was linked to increased activity in neural networks related to cognitive flexibility and emotional control when facing opposing views. Erasmus did not just change the content of what humans thought, but changed the manner in which humans performed the act of thinking. Continuing that spirit, Thomas More brought humanistic yearning to a new height through the work Utopia, a name he invented with dual meanings of a good place and a non-existent place. In this work, More performed a surgery on the unjust reality of 16th-century English society, where he bitterly cried that sheep were eating men, to describe the seizure of peasant lands. To contrast with that brutal reality, he sketched an ideal island where private property was abolished and all resources were shared fairly. In Utopia, labor was not a hardship but a brief duty to make time for intellectual and cultural cultivation. More argued that human greed and pride arise from the gap between rich and poor and unequal social structures by changing the operating system of society. He believed humans could live in peace and tolerance. The political and social system of utopia was built on the foundation of pure reason and classical moral philosophy. Every citizen was educated equally. Men and women were equal in accessing knowledge, and religious beliefs were free in mutual respect. Thomas More used this model to ask fundamental questions about the relationship between individual and state, between private interest and public good. Unlike Machiavelli, who focused on seizing power, More focused on the purpose of power. For him, the supreme duty of a ruler was ensuring prosperity and happiness for all social classes. The appearance of utopia started a long flow of idealistic political philosophy, laying foundations for socialist theories and community rights later. Although knowing his island was a distant dream, More persistently used it as a mirror for humanity to recognize the ugly scars on reality's face. The similarity between More's thoughts and ideals of a great harmony society in Eastern philosophy, specifically Confucius's thought regarding a harmonious world, is a unique intellectual fiber. Both believed a sustainable social order must start from moral cultivation of each individual and the wise example of intellectual leaders. Thomas More emphasized that without fairness in property distribution, all laws or political institutions are merely tools for the strong to exploit the weak. He also sharply criticized the bellicosity of contemporary monarchs, who prioritized territorial expansion over improving people's lives. His thinking represented a sober humanistic conscience, ready to face power to protect values he believed were eternal truths. However, the lives of both Erasmus and Thomas More ended in personal tragedies and struggles between loyalty to the Church and the yearning for reform. When the Reformation exploded, Erasmus's middle ground was attacked from both sides, making him a lonely figure in history's torrent. Meanwhile, Thomas More chose death on the scaffold to protect faith and conscience integrity before the arbitrary demands of King Henry VIII. More's death was the strongest proof for the belief that there are moral values higher than political power and even human life. They proved that intellectuals are not just reality observers, but guardians of humanity's highest dreams. Their legacy lies not in specific political institutions established, but in planting seeds for the yearning for a more humane world, where reason and compassion always walk together. The yearning for a perfect society, proposed by More and Erasmus, forced humanity to face their own limits. They pointed out that without an ideal vision, society would easily fall into brutality and blind pragmatism. Studying utopia is not to find a real geographical map, but to find a moral map for human behavior. Their impossible dreams were the necessary push so reality could constantly improve. The combination of scholarly knowledge and deep compassion of northern humanists created an important counterweight to Machiavelli's cold realism, completing the diverse picture of Renaissance consciousness. These ideals will continue to drive revolutions in methodology and experimental science in following historical stages. Part 4: Francis Bacon and the Revolution of Empirical Methodology. The transition of Renaissance thought did not stop at honoring humans or redefining politics. It progressed toward a major reform in how humanity explores nature. Standing at the center is Francis Bacon, an English philosopher and politician who bravely challenged the entire Aristotelian logic dominating Western thought. For a millennium, Bacon noticed that medieval knowledge relied mostly on wordy debates and deductive syllogisms capable only of clarifying known things but not creating new knowledge. He set an ambitious goal to re-establish all knowledge on a firmer foundation, which is direct observation and experimentation. For Bacon, knowledge is not something to be passively admired but a power tool for humans to master and reform nature for life. The famous slogan, "Knowledge is power," is the manifesto for an era where science becomes the main drive for civilizational progress. To build a new methodology in Novum Organum, Bacon began by identifying classic errors of human intellect, barriers he called the four idols. He argued the human mind is not a flat mirror reflecting reality truthfully, but a distorted mirror deforming light from objects. The first is the idols of the tribe, reflecting common human nature, limits like seeking order where none exists, or believing what one desires to be true. The second is the idols of the cave, referring to personal biases formed from education habits and environment. The third is the idols of the marketplace, arising from vague and inaccurate language in communication. And finally, the idols of the theater, false dogmas and past doctrines, creating phantom worlds on the stage. Identifying and eliminating these idols is the first mandatory step to objective truth access. From the perspective of modern cognitive science, Bacon's analysis of the idols is the earliest forecast of cognitive biases. Idols of the tribe correspond to mental heuristics designed for speed, but prone to error when the brain prioritizes information confirming existing beliefs. Known as confirmation bias, it operates exactly as Bacon warned. Idols of the cave and marketplace reflect how cultural environments and language structures shape neural networks, creating cognitive filters making it hard to escape old concept comfort zones. Bacon realized the intellect needs strict control to avoid deception by its own natural mechanisms. His emphasis on recording and empirical verification is a way to create an external system helping the brain overcome internal logical errors, replacing the old syllogism. Bacon proposed induction instead of starting from vague general principles to reach specific conclusions. He required humans to start by gathering factual data, performing meticulous observations, and building tables of presence-absence and degree from these specific cases. The scientist gradually deduces general laws. Bacon's method requires intellectual patience and humility. We must let nature speak instead of imposing will on it. He likened old scientists to spiders, spinning webs from their bellies. Pure empiricists to ants, merely gathering, and the ideal model to bees gathering material from flowers, but using capacity to transform them into knowledge. Honey. This shift completely changed humanity's truth search algorithm, laying firm foundations for the scientific revolution. In following centuries, Bacon's thought on science's social role is clearly expressed in New Atlantis. In this utopia, the social center is Solomon's house, a giant scientific research institute where sages dedicate lives to discovering nature's secrets to improve human life. Unlike Thomas More's utopia, focusing on moral and social structures, Bacon's New Atlantis focuses on technological power and nature control. He believed through science humanity could cure diseases, prolong life, and create unprecedented wealth. This vision turned science from a private noble hobby into a national and human project. The later establishment of the Royal Society of London was the direct realization of Bacon's ideas regarding a collaborative scientific community, sharing knowledge. The similarity between Francis Bacon's view and pragmatic spirit in Eastern philosophy, specifically the seek truth from facts of the school of evidential scholarship, is noteworthy. Both emphasized seeking truth from objective evidence instead of relying blindly on ancient classics. Bacon argued, we should not be slaves to ancient authors because truth is the daughter of time, not authority. He affirmed each generation has the responsibility to expand knowledge boundaries based on new experiences. This intellectual confidence liberated humans from fear of supernatural forces and dogmatic prejudices, creating a proactive mindset in constructing the future. However, he also warned, mastering nature must go with deep understanding of its laws because nature is only conquered by obeying it. Although Bacon's induction later revealed logical limitations and lack of mathematical models, which Descartes and Galileo would add, his contribution in changing humanity's attitude toward the world, is undeniable. He turned knowledge into a practical task, linked with continuous observation and testing. His life ended due to his devotion to experimentation. He died of pneumonia after trying to stuff a chicken with snow to test cold's preservation ability. His death is a final proof of Renaissance scientific spirit, ready to venture into unknown realities to find useful truths for humanity. Francis Bacon's legacy is the formation of a new mindset seeking the universe's operating code through undeniable evidence of physical reality. Bacon's thought system created a firm bridge leading humanity away from dogmatic ignorance into the era of empirical reason. It teaches humans that to understand the world, we must have courage to doubt our own senses and prejudices. Dissecting cognitive barriers paved the way for specialized sciences to bloom, from physics, biology to later studies of the human mind. Every experiment and meticulous observation of modern scientists carries the breadth of the methodology Bacon built. The journey of conquering empirical knowledge equipped humans with a robust toolkit to not only understand the world, but change it fundamentally and sustainably. These methodological revolutions will continue to be inherited and expanded by following brilliant minds when the human ego begins deeper explorations into its own doubt and existence. Part 5. Michel de Montaigne and the Journey of Self-Discovery Through Skepticism. When revolutions in methodology and politics were busy conquering the outside world, Renaissance philosophy witnessed a silent but vital turn inward toward the human interior. The central figure of this journey was Michel de Montaigne, a French nobleman who chose to withdraw from chaotic political life to return to his library and begin an unprecedented intellectual project. Instead of building giant systems about the universe or the state, Montaigne asked a simple but heavy question: Que sais-je, or what do I know? Through his great work, Essays, he turned himself into the only and most honest research object. Montaigne did not seek eternal truths or rigid dogmas. He sought understanding of the constant changes of the human soul. The birth of the essay genre was not just a literary invention but the establishment of a new mindset, thinking of the self as a continuous flow, an entity always observing and doubting itself. To find freedom in cognition, Montaigne's skepticism was not negative or denying truth's existence, but a methodological skepticism to free humans from intellectual arrogance. He noticed that humans tend to cling to subjective beliefs and view them as objective truth. By dissecting prejudices, habits, and irrationalities in his own behavior, he pointed out that our knowledge is always relative and limited by personal perspective in the famous essay, Apology for Raymond, Sebald Montaigne performed an attack on human pride which always views itself as the center of creation. He placed man equal to other creatures, reminding us that we have no privileged status in the universe besides the ability to reflect on our own finitude. For Montaigne's skepticism was an antidote to fanaticism, a tool to maintain sobriety amidst an era full of bloody religious and ideological conflicts. The contribution of Montaigne to forming the self-concept can be illuminated through metacognition, which is the brain's ability to monitor and regulate its own thought processes. Montaigne did not just think, but he thought about how he was thinking. He observed how emotions dominate reason, how memory distorts over time, and how his identity changed through each life stage. This self-observation requires smooth coordination between prefrontal cortex functional areas responsible for self-awareness and cognitive control, recording personal experiences in detail and honesty was an effort to build a map for the inner world, which is always hazy and uncertain. Through this, Montaigne proved that man is not a unified and static block, but a collection of contradictions and moving fragments. Montaigne's writing style reflected the core Renaissance spirit, free, bold, and unafraid of naked truth. He was ready to discuss every aspect of life, from high philosophical issues to trivial details about health, eating habits, or fear of death. He believed to understand humanity, one must understand a specific individual, and the closest individual was himself. Montaigne affirmed that each man carries the entire form of human condition. This thought broke barriers between private and common, turning subjective personal experiences into universal lessons on existence. His emphasis on absolute honesty created a powerful attraction, making readers feel like talking to a soulmate, someone who does not hide flaws or fears under a veneer of fake wisdom. Montaigne's philosophy also carried deep tolerance and cultural relativism. In the essay of Cannibals, he provided a breakthrough view comparing American tribal lifestyles with civilized European society. He argued that we often call barbaric what is unfamiliar to our habits, but actually, the brutality of European religious wars was much more horrible than indigenous rituals. Skepticism toward Western cultural superiority helped Montaigne build an open and respectful attitude toward human diversity. He believed our reason is a flexible tool but easily deceived by environment. Therefore, instead of imposing our values on others, we should learn to live with difference and constantly question what we believe. This mindset laid foundations for humanistic values and free thought in modern society. The relationship between death and life was also a vital thought fiber in Montaigne's works. He inherited Stoic thoughts suggesting that to philosophize is to learn how to die. However, over time skepticism and love for life led him to a gentler view. Death is not a scary enemy but a necessary part of the natural cycle. Instead of spending life preparing for death, Montaigne advised us to focus on living fully and true to our nature. He considered caring for body and spirit a noble moral duty, accepting human limits and finding joy in simple things was the final wisdom he aimed for. Montaigne happiness lies not in external achievements but in a calm and free soul, in inner fortress that no power can invade. Although Montaigne left no rigid philosophical system or specific scientific laws, his contribution in changing human consciousness is immeasurable. He taught humans how to dialogue with themselves, how to accept imperfection and maintain healthy doubt before all authority. Montaigne's spirit deeply influenced brilliant minds later, like Descartes, Pascal, or Shakespeare. Descartes used Montaigne's skepticism as a launchpad to seek a firm ground for reason, while Pascal found their humility before God's greatness. Shakespeare also borrowed Montaigne's reflections to mold characters with complex inner depth. In human literature, Montaigne's legacy is the affirmation of individual value and the power of self-awareness in shaping reality. The birth of the modern self through Montaigne's lens opened a new era for Renaissance thought, where the inner world became a vast universe needing exploration, no less than new continents or distant stars. Dissecting the mechanisms of skepticism and metacognition helped humans realize that truth lies not only in external physical evidence but also in honesty toward oneself. Every writing of Montaigne is a reminder of intellectual flexibility and the necessity of compassion for oneself and others. The journey into the self-equipped humanity with a proactive mindset to face history's upheavals and fate's uncertainty. These steps of skepticism will continue, guiding deeper explorations into the nature of existence and the endless universe. In following stages of human thought, history, Part 6, Giordano Bruno and the vision of an infinite universe. When humanist thoughts established man's status and empirical methods shaped our observation, Renaissance philosophy performed the greatest leap, breaking sky boundaries. The central figure of this consciousness rebellion was Giordano Bruno, an Italian Dominican friar who transformed Nicolaus Copernicus's early astronomical observations into a philosophical system destructive to the old worldview. While most contemporaries believed Earth or Sun was the sole center of a finite universe, enclosed by crystal spheres. Bruno bravely declared an infinite space with no beginning or end. For him the universe was not a narrow cage created for humans, but a living, eternal entity containing countless worlds similar to our own. Bruno's appearance permanently changed humanity's coordinates, forcing man to face their smallness before the greatness of nothingness, while opening a powerful belief in intellect to perceive the deepest secrets of all things. Giordano Bruno's core thought started by inheriting heliocentrism but pushed it to impossible heights in works like On the Infinite Universe and Worlds. He argued if the first cause is an infinite God, the result must be infinite too. Bruno completely denied the concept of a cosmic center. He affirmed that at any point in space the observer feels at the center. Our sun is just one star among billions of others, and each star could have planets and living beings. This was a terrible intellectual liberation, shattering the geocentric hierarchy which was the foundation for church power then. Bruno viewed the universe as a mirror reflecting divine nature where every tiny atom contains creation's entire energy and wisdom. Bruno's view on God carried deep pantheistic characteristics, a dangerous move in 16th century harsh religious contexts. He did not view God as an external judge separate from the world, but considered God as the immanent power, the world soul, present in every fiber of matter. For Bruno, nature and God are one. All things move and change according to a common rhythm of eternal life. He rejected salvation dogmas or traditional religious rituals, replacing them with an intellectual worship. Bruno believed humans could merge with God through understanding nature's laws, using reason and knowledge. Passion, this unity of spirit and matter made him an irreconcilable enemy of the Inquisition because it erased the necessity of church intermediaries in connecting humans to the absolute. Giordano Bruno's persistence towards scientific and philosophical truth led him to one of history's most tragic endings. After years traveling across Europe preaching about the infinite universe, he was arrested and imprisoned for 8 long years in Rome's Inquisition dungeons, despite harsh interrogations and threats of being burned alive. Bruno firmly refused to recant his views. He declared to his judges they were perhaps more afraid passing sentence than he was hearing it. In 1600, Bruno was burned alive at Campo de' Fiori, with his tongue clamped to prevent final heretical words. His death was not an end, but a torch for free thought. Bruno proved human will can stand firm against violence and ignorance to protect a reality vision he believed was eternal. Regarding cognition, Bruno's thought on infinity required a complete change in human spatial image structures. Accepting a centerless universe forced the mind to abandon safe supports to familiarize with relativity. The similarity between Bruno's view and Eastern philosophy, especially emptiness in Buddhism or Taoism's infinity, is a profound intellectual point. Both saw unity between micro and macro, where a sand grain contains 3,000 great worlds. Bruno found comfort in that infinity. He did not feel fear before vast space but felt pride being part of the inexhaustible energy flow. His thinking laid foundations for Isaac Newton's later discoveries regarding gravity and even Albert Einstein's relativity in the 20th century. Bruno's vision also extended to education and memory through techniques he called mnemonics. He believed the human mind is a microcosm of the universe, and by training associative ability we can contain humanity's entire knowledge. For Bruno, learning was not passive information reception but a process awakening latent memories of unity. He emphasized creativity and reasoning as the highest Renaissance human virtues. His rebellion against old doctrines was not just for science, but for a yearning to liberate the human soul from fear chains and intellectual narrowness. Bruno turned philosophy into a risky adventure into the invisible, where truth is only for those brave enough to look straight into light's truth. Although Bruno's views then still carried mystical elements and lacked precise mathematical tools to prove his influence on modern consciousness is undeniable. He paved the way for true astronomical revolutions, helping following generations like Galileo Galilei or Johannes Kepler have courage to publish findings. Bruno taught us that the world doesn't stop at what eyes can see, and human intellect can transcend every physical border to touch the infinite. His sacrifice is an eternal reminder of academic freedom's value and the necessity of questioning power structures based on lies. Reflections on an infinite universe turned each individual into a center of consciousness, an entity responsible for their existence in vast space. The journey through Giordano Bruno's infinite worlds closed an important chapter of Renaissance intellectual rebellion, while opening doors for modern physics and astronomy development. The shift from a closed universe to an open one completely changed humanity's psychology, creating a sense of freedom yet challenge, dissecting old notions of celestial order, equipped humans with a new vision to view their cosmic status. Every star twinkling in the night sky now was no longer a soulless lamp on crystal domes, but evidence for creation's infinite richness, which Bruno used his life to affirm. These bold steps will continue to be connected and synthesized as humanity prepares to summarize the entire Renaissance legacy, to prepare for a new era of light and reason. Part 7, The Great Bridge, synthesizing the Renaissance legacy and preparing for the Age of Enlightenment. The end of the Renaissance was not a fading away but a great transformation of ideas into modern civilization's structure. What began with recovering ancient manuscripts developed into a new operating system for human consciousness. The Renaissance acted as a giant bridge connecting the medieval theocentric worldview with the modern rational worldview. Through 3 turbulent centuries, humanity performed a complete restructuring of belief, power, method, and self. The profound penetrations of humanism, political realism, empirical methods, and infinite cosmic visions created a firm foundation for philosophers and scientists in following centuries like René Descartes, Baruch Spinoza, or Isaac Newton to build the castle of enlightened reason. The Renaissance legacy is liberating creative energy and intellect from preset patterns, establishing eternal belief that humans have the capacity and responsibility to self-create their own future. The most important point in this synthesis is establishing the individual status as an autonomous subject. From Francesco Petrarch's reflections on secular life values to Pico della Mirandola's manifesto on human dignity, man escaped being a passive entity to become the architect of destiny. This freedom was not an abstract concept, but was materialized through the self's rise. In Michel de Montaigne's essays, man starting to observe, doubt, and understand themselves created a shift in social information processing. Instead of accepting a single truth from power institutions, the human mind learned to operate as an open system ready to accept reality's diversity and complexity. The shift from we to I laid legal and moral foundations for individual rights and free thought, which are pillars of later democratic societies. Regarding politics, the separation between religious morality and power reality by Niccolò Machiavelli created a revolution in social governance. The Renaissance witnessed the formation of city-states and early nation-states where national interest and administrative efficiency became top priorities. Secularizing politics not only reduced church influence on worldly matters, but forced humans to seek new standards for justice and social order. Dreams of a perfect society in Thomas More's Utopia or Erasmus's humanistic spirit acted as moral compasses balancing cold pragmatism. The interaction between realism and idealism created a rich political discussion space leading to social contract theories and liberalism. In the next stage, humanity learned that power is not a divine privilege but a tool needing control and direction by reason and common interest. in cognition and science. Francis Bacon's methodological revolution completely changed how we interact with nature, replacing dogmatic deduction with empirical induction, turned knowledge from a closed system into a constant discovery process. Humans no longer viewed the world as a text needing interpretation but as a source code needing decoding through observation and experimentation. Giordano Bruno's vision of an infinite universe broke final intellectual fear boundaries, leading humans into a vast space with no understanding limits. This shift was linked to the development of thinking tools like printing presses, telescopes, and new mathematical methods. From social neuroscience perspectives, the richness of information and opposing thought flows stimulated intellectual linkage networks, creating an optimal environment for inventions and great discoveries. Explosion. The Renaissance synthesis was also clearly expressed through changes in education and knowledge concepts. The Studia Humanitatis humanist model created multi-talented individuals who were not only technically skilled but possessed artistic souls and philosophical depth, combining theory and practice. Art and science became a new standard for human excellence. This can be seen through geniuses like Leonardo da Vinci, where dissecting human bodies for painting was also a serious scientific research process. The Renaissance taught us that knowledge is a unity, and discipline fragmentation is just a narrowing of perspective. Cultivating interdisciplinary thinking and infinite curiosity is the most precious gift this era left for posterity, helping humanity maintain a proactive mindset before history's harsh changes. However, preparing for the Enlightenment lay not only in brilliant achievements but in identifying contradictions. The Renaissance left Montaigne's skepticism and Bacon's sharp knife shook old spiritual supports, creating a certain belief void. This void pushed following philosopher generations to seek new foundations for knowledge. Certainty. René Descartes would start from that very doubt to establish the proposition "I think, therefore I am," making reason the sole supreme judge. The Renaissance cleared dogma ruins so modern reason had empty land to build tighter philosophical systems. Debates about faith and reason, freedom and destiny haven't ended but were placed on a new scale, where evidence and logic always have the decisive voice. The belief structure shift from divine to human and from heaven to physical reality was the great bridge leading to modern world formation. The Renaissance provided humanity a robust toolkit to not only explain the world but master it. Humanist values, empirical spirit and free thought yearning became Western civilization's gene code, gradually spreading globally. Reviewing this journey helps us realize every progress stems from the courage of asking and the persistence of seeking answers. The legacy of humanists, political realists, and Renaissance scientists still flows in modern thought's veins, reminding us of human intellect's infinite potential when placed in a free and tolerant environment. The journey through Renaissance thought world connected all individual intellectual fibers into a panorama of human maturity. We saw a self-aware ego sprout from skepticism, a realistic power system form from naked observation, and an infinite universe accepted through intellectual courage. All these factors converged to create a synergy preparing for an explosion of enlightened reason in following centuries. This preparation lay not just in works or theories, but in a permanent change in human attitude toward existence. Every Renaissance step was an affirmation that understanding's light is always stronger than fear's darkness. These values will continue to be inherited, expanded, and challenged as humanity enters new stages of the journey, discovering themselves and the vast universe.